Christmas Day, 1969. Tokyo, Japan. While half the world was still celebrating that humans walked on the moon 5 months earlier, something equally earth-shattering was quietly unfolding inside a Tokyo store. A single Japanese watch went on sale. And over the next 15 years, it would kill more than 60,000 jobs, erase hundreds of companies, and bring an entire nation to its knees. That nation was Switzerland. The watch was called the Seiko Astron. It cost 450,000 Japanese yen, the same price as a brand new Toyota Corolla at the time, and roughly $11,000 in today's money. This was not a cheap gadget. The case was hand-carved from solid 18-karat gold, with an engraved finish so detailed it would make a Swiss craftsman deeply uncomfortable. Printed across Seiko's promotional materials was one single line, a line that should have terrified every watchmaker in Europe. Someday, all watches will be made this way. That was not a marketing slogan, it was a warning, and it aged perfectly.
To understand how we got here, we need to travel back a full decade to 1959. A 36-year-old engineer named Tsuneya Nakamura was quietly handed the most consequential assignment in watchmaking history. His mission was simple: shrink a quartz clock down to something small enough to wear on a human wrist. Simple enough, right? Here is the problem. The Seiko quartz clock of that era, the kind used at radio broadcasting stations, was roughly the size of a large bookcase. Nakamura's team had to compress all of that technology by a factor of 300,000, with a starting crew of just 7 people, working in complete secrecy. No pressure whatsoever. The project, codenamed 59A, ran for a full decade. Along the way, the team invented a tuning fork crystal that vibrated 8,192 times every second, 100 times faster than any mechanical watch balance wheel. They built a motor wound with copper wire thinner than a human hair, consuming so little electricity that a small battery could run the entire watch for over a year. And they soldered 128 connection points entirely by hand, because the integrated circuits required simply did not exist yet. Every single component had to be reimagined from scratch. So what turned up the heat even further? In 1959, the Olympic Committee announced that Tokyo would host the 1964 Summer Games. Seiko immediately locked onto a new ambition: to become the official timekeeper. This one decision redirected everything. By 1964, Seiko had deployed 36 timing device models, over 1,200 instruments, and 172 staff across every venue. Among these was the world's first portable quartz clock, accurate to 0.2 of a second per day, running entirely on battery power. No cables, no compromise. The whole world watched those Olympics, and whether they knew it or not, they were watching Seiko's technology keep the time. But here is a twist almost nobody talks about, one that connects that Olympic stopwatch to the printer sitting in your home right now. The electronic printing timers Seiko built for those 1964 games, the ones that recorded race results and printed them within seconds, were so advanced that Seiko turned them into a commercial product. In 1968, they launched the EP101, the world's first compact electronic printer. That line grew so rapidly, it became its own independent company. They named it Epson, which literally means the son of the EP. The brand on your office printer traces its entire existence back to a Seiko stopwatch at a Tokyo athletics track. You are welcome. Now, if Seiko was quietly building all of this in Japan, you might assume Switzerland was caught completely off guard, asleep, oblivious. But the reality is far more fascinating, and honestly, a lot more embarrassing for the Swiss. In 1962, 7 full years before the Astron launched, 20 of the most powerful Swiss watchmakers secretly formed a research group called the Centre Electronique Horology. The founding members included Patek Philippe, Omega, Rolex, IWC, and Longines. Their single mission was to build a Swiss quartz wristwatch before Japan did. By July 1967, they had succeeded. Their prototype, The Beta 1 was a fully working quartz wristwatch, 2 years before the Astron. Switzerland crossed the finish line in the lab first. So how did they still manage to lose? 3 reasons, and they get more damaging as they go. First, a battery problem. The Beta 1 barely lasted a year on a single charge, so rather than ship it and improve along the way, the Swiss chose to wait for perfection. Second, a leadership crisis. The Centre Electronique Horology director was forced out for keeping results hidden from shareholders, and his replacement had initially refused to work on quartz at all. Third, and this is the one that truly finished them, a committee problem. Getting 20 fierce competitors to agree on a single path is roughly as smooth as assembling furniture, with 20 strangers who all believe they are the most qualified person in the room. By the time the group received approval to move into production, it was 1968. Their commercial movement, the Beta 21, arrived months after the Astron was already on wrists, outdated before it even launched. Switzerland had the technology first, the resources, 5 centuries of tradition, and arguably the finest craftspeople alive. Yet organisational paralysis, internal rivalry, and a fatal hesitation handed the entire future to a Japanese company that simply refused to wait. And sticking with this story is just as hard to resist as not hitting that subscribe button right now. So go ahead, we will still be here. After the Astron launched, Seiko did something that broke every rule of conventional business. They opened their patents to the entire world. The oscillator design, the stepping motor, the energy-saving circuit, all of it was freely available to any company that wanted it. Why would any organisation hand the exact weapon it used to defeat its rivals directly to those same rivals? Because Seiko understood something most businesses never grasp. If every manufacturer on Earth adopted their architecture, that design would stop being a product and become a universal standard, a foundation every future quartz watch would rest upon. Compare that to Bulova, an American brand that had built a similarly groundbreaking tuning fork watch called the Accutron a decade earlier, then locked every single patent tightly away. Bulova kept their secret. Seiko gave theirs to the world. Today, Seiko is recognized on every continent. Outside dedicated watch circles, Bulova is largely forgotten. Generosity, it turns out, can be the sharpest competitive strategy of all. Yet even knowing all of this, the true scale of what happened next in Switzerland is something most people, even passionate watch collectors, have never fully reckoned with. In 1970, Switzerland employed 90,000 people across 1,600 watch companies. By 1984, employment had collapsed to 33,000. 60,000 skilled workers simply gone. More than half of all Swiss watch companies vanished entirely. Whole towns in the Jura Mountains, places where watchmaking had been the only industry for generations, lost 8% of their total populations in a single decade. These were not generalists who could pivot to another field. They were craftspeople whose skills, refined over lifetimes, became almost overnight redundant. And when the Swiss franc surged against the dollar in the same period, American buyers, who represented over a third of Swiss exports, found Swiss watches suddenly far more expensive. Switzerland was not simply out-innovated. The whole global economy turned on them at once. Yet Switzerland did not disappear. In 1983, a consultant named Nicholas Hayek was hired by banks to assess the damage and decide whether the industry deserved saving. Hayek chose to do neither of the things the banks expected. He merged the two largest failing groups, slashed costs, and launched a 50-franc plastic quartz watch built from just 51 components. He called it the Swatch. By 1986, 23 million had been sold. By 1992, 100 million had been sold. Those profits rescued Omega, stabilized Longines, and eventually funded the acquisition of Breguet and Blancpain. Switzerland rebuilt an entire industry on a cheap plastic watch. They then used those earnings to reposition its luxury names as objects no quartz movement could ever replace. Once accuracy became something anyone could afford, the Swiss stopped selling accuracy altogether. They started selling emotion, legacy, and identity. A Rolex does not keep better time than a $10 quartz movement from a market stall. It tells a completely different story, and that story is worth billions. The Seiko Astron turned precision from a privilege into something ordinary, then handed the blueprint to the world for free. It sparked an industrial collapse, forced a cultural reinvention, and quietly changed what time itself means to us. One watch, one Christmas morning, one prophecy. Someday all watches will be made this way. They were.